Warning: this what if contains graphic descriptions of gore, violence, and other disturbing imagery. Viewer discretion is advised. What's up, everyone? It's me, the man, the myth, the mustache, Tim here, and I have a brand new series for you. Welcome to part 1 of King's Game. As I said in the disclaimer, this story is very violent and very graphic, so if that sort of thing upsets you, it's okay if you don't want to continue listening. That being said, for those of you that want to sit through this, let's get this story going, shall we? Aizawa stirred from his slumber, noticing he wasn't surrounded by the comfort of his bedding. Rather, he felt the coldness of stone. He awoke to find himself in a room he had not seen in years, and he had wished to keep it that way. Unfortunately, someone had other plans in mind. His students were there, only just regaining consciousness. They looked around, confused and somewhat frightful at their current predicament. Some wondered where they were and how they got to this location. Some were confused as to why they were in their school uniforms. They all remembered changing into their pajamas. All right, everyone, let's calm down and think this through. Did anything strange happen yesterday? Ida asked. No one could come up with anything in particular. It was a normal day of schoolwork and training. Everyone spoke about what they did after class and around what times they went to bed. Kaminari was the last one to go to bed, staying up until 10 p.m. because he lost track of time playing a video game. Aizawa interjected. That's right. I was doing my lights out check and told you to go to bed. What did you do after that, Mr. Aizawa? Yaoyorozu asked. I finished up a few things in my office, then went to bed around 11 p.m. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. So, whatever caused us to get here happened sometime after 11 p.m. It doesn't seem possible that the League of Villains captured all of us. That would be too difficult to pull off considering they got all of us, unless... Midoriya went on like a mumbling train of thought for a while. Everyone began to investigate the environment. The Baku squad looked around the adjacent room, which appeared to be some sort of storage room. There were shelving units along all of the walls, except for a small section. It was left open to allow access to what seemed to be a laundry chute. Bakugo inspected the chute's hatch when he noticed lettering above it. It read, "Messes go here," with an arrow pointing to the hatch. Something about that put the atomic blonde on edge. Sero and Ashido were looking at one of the shelves, while Kaminari and Kirishima were looking at another. Pinky and Cellophane found a plethora of tools and items. Some were for gardening and house maintenance, while others were for rock climbing or first aid. Charge Bolt and Red Riot found martial arts equipment and heavy-duty tools on their shelves. There were weapons, like knives, and protective gear like helmets and knee pads. They even found a chainsaw and machete. While that was going on, the Deku squad looked over the two identical doors. Uraraka pulled the left door open, and the group was greeted by a rush of cold air. Todoroki, being built to handle extreme temperatures, entered the small closet-sized room. He saw a frosted-over temperature gauge and could just make out its reading. It says it's below 0 degrees in here. Do you think this is some sort of freezer? Uraraka asked. It's possible. Midoriya opened the other door and got blasted by intense, dry heat. Todoroki inspected the inside of the hotbox and found another temperature gauge. This says 170 degrees Fahrenheit. That's over 75 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure what this room is used for, but it makes me uneasy. Shoji and Jiro were using their quirks on the walls, trying to get a clue as to where they were. The others were looking for a secret door or hatch. It was logical to think there was a way out if they were put in here. All the while, Aizawa was standing in front of some monitors. There was a large one in the middle, with 35 smaller ones surrounding it. They were off for the time being, but Aizawa glared at them all the same. He hated those screens, this place. The main problem Aizawa had was his memories of this place. They felt incomplete, fragmented. I've got nothing. What about you, Jiro? Shoji asked. Gah! Nothing. I'm not picking up anything. It's like there's nothing but concrete for miles around us. Everyone returned to the main room and shared their findings. The lack of an escape route made everyone nervous and fearful. Without warning, the central monitor came to life with the sound of TV static and displayed a signal test. 21 of the smaller monitors lit up, each displaying a face of a 1A student, accompanied by a number. The central monitor then turned white with black text, welcoming everyone to the King's Game, before displaying the rules. Rule 1. All players must participate. Rule 2. After receiving an order from the king, the order must be completed within the given time limit. Rule 3. Players who do not complete their orders shall be punished. Rule 4. Withdrawing from the game midway is not allowed. And Rule 5. All messes must be cleaned within the 5-hour time limit before the game can progress. The knot in Aizawa's stomach tightened. His students began to whisper amongst themselves, wondering if this was some sort of training or a prank. The first order appeared on the monitor. Player 18 must strike player 17 on the face within 30 minutes, or both players will be punished. Player 17 cannot physically retaliate against player 18. A 30-minute timer began to tick down. Player number? Why not use our names? Yaoyorozu asked. Maybe it's some sort of AI. Or program, Ida interjected. Like hell I let Deku hit me! You set this game up, didn't you, nerd? So you could get a free hit on me? When would I have time to set this up, Kachan? Plus, if I wanted to hit you, I'd ask if you want to train. Bakugo was silent by that logic. The nerd did have a point. Come on, Bakugo. It's not like you've never taken a hit to the face before. Besides, it never said how hard the hit had to be, Kirishima said. That's right. It just said it had to hit your face, Tsuyu added. Even if that was the case, Bakugo didn't like the idea of letting Midoriya hit him. Kachan, it's just a game. Maybe this king, whoever he is, will let us go if we play along, and people will start looking for us once they notice we're missing. By playing this game, we're also buying them time, Todoroki said. Fine. Let's just get it over with already. Midoriya nodded and backhanded his childhood friend. Despite the satisfying noise the freckled boy's hand made against the blonde's face, it barely left a mark. My mom hits harder than you! A new message appeared on the screen. Obedience confirmed. Well, that was easy, Sero said. I wonder what it meant by punishment, Ashido asked. Aizawa looked to his students. Trust me, you don't want to find out. Ida looked concerned at his teacher. Have you played this game before, Sensei? Aizawa was going to answer, but was interrupted by the next order appearing on the screen. Player 20 and Player 12 must kiss on the lips within 30 minutes, or both players will be punished. The timer began to tick down again. Everyone was checking who those players were before turning to Jiro and Yaoyorozu. The purple-haired rock star was hiding her face in embarrassment, while the class's vice representative was vexed. Such an odd thing to ask, Yaoyorozu said. I can't do that. That's too weird, Jiro said. I don't see anything weird about it, Kaminari said. Me neither, Mineta interjected. Of course you would. You two would want to see that, Jiro said angrily to the two. The devious duo only gave thumbs up in response. Yaoyorozu turned Jiro's attention back to her. Is this your first kiss? Is that what's making you nervous? Jiro nodded. Well, this would be my first kiss too. Do you want to be each other's firsts? The rock star froze for a moment before nodding, her face as red as a tomato. Yaoyorozu kissed her blushing friend. The rest of 1A cheered as the message, Obedience confirmed, appeared on the monitor. Player 10 must lick Player 11's armpit within 20 minutes, or both players will be punished. Less time than before, Tokoyami said. Do you think the time is based on the order, or we'll just get less time the longer we play? Hagakure asked. Dude, where is your armpit anyway? Sero asked Shoji. Shoji raised the arms on his right side and looked for a moment before shrugging. It wasn't something the duply-armed teen thought about. While his students were trying to find Shoji's armpit, Aizawa became antsier as the clock ticked down. To be invited to the king's game is a fate that Pro Hero would never wish for anyone. It took 10 whole minutes before Sero was able to complete his order. The words, Obedience confirmed, appeared on the screen as Sero was retching in a corner. The next order was given, and everyone was disgusted. Player 19 must touch Player 16's chest within 20 minutes, or both players will be punished. Oh yeah! Let me grab those boobies! Mineta said excitedly. The small boy made a beeline for the invisible girl. Mineta's advance was halted when Sero taped up the perverted student with his quirk. The rest of the girls stood in front of Hagakure protectively. There's no way we'd let you do that, order or not, Ashido said. Come on, everyone else followed their orders. I have to follow mine or else Hagakure and I'll get punished. For all we know, you could have set this game up as an excuse to do gross things, Uaraka said. When would I have time to do that? For starters, you spend a lot of time in your room alone, Sue said. I don't see what the big deal is. It's not like Mineta was ordered to do anything worse, Kaminari said. Of course you would say that, Jiro replied. Mr. Aizawa, please don't make me do this, Hagakure begged. If you want to avoid the punishments, you have to follow the king's orders, Aizawa said darkly. This came out of left field. Never in any of their lives did the students of 1A think they would hear Eraserhead defend Mineta's perverted actions. The King's game is a death game. If we're not going to get out of this relatively unscathed, we have to listen to the King's orders. I'm sorry, Hagakure, but it's out of my hands. Despite her face not being visible, Hagakure's body language portrayed betrayal and disbelief. No, this can't be true. You're lying. I'd rather die than let that perverted munchkin touch me. Aizawa wasn't surprised by the response, but it disheartened him all the same. He couldn't force his students to follow the King's orders. That's something the King wouldn't be fond of. There was nothing more the pro-hero could do. His students would learn the hard way in about 15 minutes. Mineta was taped to the wall to prevent him from doing any mischief. As time ticked down, some of the class started to get nervous. Aizawa obviously knew about this game from experience, and the fact he called it a death game. The students wanted to ask questions, but were too anxious to make inquiries. The timer ticked away as everyone waited in stifling silence. There were only 90 seconds left for Mineta to complete his order. The smallest of 1A began to panic and attempted to break free from Cellophane's tape. Come on, guys! I promise I won't be gross or weird or anything about it. I'll be quick with the touch. I'll touch the fighter that makes a difference. Just please let me go. I don't want to be punished. But there was no time left. Obedience failed. For a moment, you could hear a pin drop. Then, Mineta began to scream in agony as an unseen force pressed him against the wall. The pressure was crushing him as his form burst like a grape underfoot, silencing him for good. All that remained was a bloody, fleshy mess. Realizing where this was going, Aizawa moved his eyes to Hagakure and activated his quirk in an attempt to save her. The effort would prove fruitless. The invisible girl's screams replaced that of the now-dead boys. The skin on her legs, arms, and face were being violently ripped off her body. Blood poured from the wounds, painting her physical form with dark red for all to see. Hagakure's wails dissolved into a pained whimper. She collapsed to her knees before falling to the ground with a wet splat. The smaller monitors that displayed Mineta's and Hagakure's pictures became red-tinted, with bright red X's painted over them. The whole class was mortified. A new message appeared on the main monitor. Clean up. A 5-hour timer started to count down. Oh my god! That didn't just happen, did it? Tell me that didn't just happen! Kaminari received no response from his shell-shocked classmates, or his shockingly placid sensei. This caused the electric blonde's anxiety to climb. He ran to the large screen and punched it a few times. Hey! Let us out of here! This isn't funny! The fearful blonde kept hitting the screen. He started to use his quirk with each attack. Small cracks started to form on the screen's glass. Kaminari, stop that right now! Aizawa ordered, but it was already too late. Both of Kaminari's charged fists crashed into the screen, shattering and exposing its internal wiring. The broken glass left lacerations on the young man's arms. The broken wires turned their attention to the electric blonde. They were like snakes as they hissed with electricity. The live wires lunged at Kaminari. They bore into his open wounds and forced their way through his arms. The electric teen writhed and screamed as the charged wires forced their way into his body. Get them off me! Make it stop! No one dared to get closer as lightning arced wildly off Kaminari. The live wires latched onto his spinal cord, and a large current was forced into his nervous system. It was more energy than Kaminari had ever felt in his life. His cries rang out as the power within the room began to flicker. As difficult as it was to hear Kaminari suffering, despair filled their hearts when he fell quiet. Kaminari's smoking corpse remained standing for a few seconds before the wires pulled out of his body. He fell to the ground in a heap. The damage to the monitor became undone, as though time were flowing backward. Kaminari's picture got a red X as the central monitor repaired itself. Withdrawing from the game midway is not allowed. Aizawa sighed. Everyone, get the cleaning supplies and body bags. I don't know what happens if we don't get this cleaned up in time. The students did as instructed and began their morbid task. It took 3 hours to get the bodies in bags and the blood washed away. Aizawa dragged the bags towards the storage room, leaving his traumatized students with their thoughts. Upon Aizawa's return, he began to tell what he could remember of his first encounter with the King's game. It was during his time as a UA student, specifically during his internship. With him were Present Mike, Midnight, Loud Cloud, Gran Torino, His Purple Highness, and a man named Stendhal. Aizawa was given an order to kill a student from UA, or he would be punished. He couldn't remember why, but he was stuck between killing one of his friends, either President Mike or Loud Cloud. Aizawa then realized a loophole in the order and tried to kill himself to protect his friends. But the king didn't like how I played his game. Loud Cloud and his Purple Highness died in the end, after receiving a message from the king that he did kill those two. That's when Aizawa learned the lesson the king was trying to teach him. Heroes shouldn't have to sacrifice themselves to protect others. The king's main goal is to teach his players a lesson. Things will only get more dangerous from here, especially if we can't figure out what lesson he's trying to teach. No matter what, everyone must follow the king's orders. Got it? Fearfully, everyone agreed. The next order appeared. Player 5 must give an order in front of everybody or be punished. The person who receives the order must follow it as if it were an order from the king. Everyone looked at Uraraka nervously as she began to sweat under the pressure. My order... I order... She suddenly got an idea. I order the king to reveal himself and end the game. He has 1 hour to do so, or else he will be punished. A 1 hour time began counting down. That actually seemed like a brilliant idea. If the king didn't follow through, he'd be dead. Aizawa seemed skeptical if this would work, though. After 10 minutes passed, the whole room powered down. It was hard to tell if this was a good thing. Power returned 5 minutes later. Uraraka's body was found pinned to the wall by a javelin, her fingers scattered on the floor underneath her. On the wall was a message written in Uraraka's blood. Clever girl, but no one tells me what to do. The message was signed by the king. The cleanup timer began again as everyone got to work. They thought Uraraka's plan would have worked. They got everything cleaned with time to spare as the next order appeared. Player 21 must gouge out their eyes within 2 hours, or 5 random players will be punished. Without hesitation, Aizawa made his way to the storage room for what he needed. Midoriya was going to say something to make Aizawa reconsider, but Ida stopped him. The price of failure was too high, and their teacher knew that. Aizawa returned with a pair of knives. He looked at his students for the last time, before plunging the blades into his eyes. The older man did what he could to bite back his screams. Blood spilled from his sockets like tears as he pulled the knives out, his breathing ragged and heavy. Is it done? Everyone looked to the monitors to see. Obedience confirmed. Ida grabbed a first aid kit from the storage room, and Yaoyorozu began patching up Aizawa as the next order appeared. Player 3 must be locked in the hot box for 2 hours, or all the even number players will be punished. Player 8 must also be locked in the cold box for 2 hours, or all the odd number players will be punished. Now things were starting to get lethal. Despite the consequences, Tsuyu and Kirishima agreed to follow the order. Everyone was worried as their classmates entered their respective boxes. The doors locked as they closed, and the timer started. Each minute that passed felt like a lifetime. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. What are you saying, Midoriya? Tokoyami asked. I realized something. Most of the orders would have resulted in others being punished if the person given the order doesn't follow through. I was thinking, does this have something to do with the king's lesson? The more everyone considered it, the more it seemed possible. After much speculation, 2 possible lessons were deduced. 1, sometimes there are only bad options. 2, even a plan made with good intentions can end poorly. Obedience confirmed. The doors unlocked. Kirishima stumbled out of the cold box and fell to the ground a shivering mess. In an attempt to keep himself warm, he hardened his body, but it only made things worse. His skin was cracked and bleeding. Half-frozen blood decorated his body. His fingers, ears, nose, and lips were blue and showed signs of frostbite. Ashido and Sero held Red Riot, while Bakugo grabbed a blanket. The 3 of them worked together to warm their friend up. I don't hear Asui. Has she come out yet? Aizawa asked. Tokoyami started to open the hotbox door, before freezing at a horrid sight. Scattered about, like crimson confetti. Worried for Tsuyu, Ashido pulled the door wide open. She screamed bloody murder as Froppy's head lazily rolled out of the door. Tsuyu Asui's body had exploded. Her arms and legs were blasted off her torso, which was split in half. Fearing the worst, Aizawa moved towards Ashido's scream. The older man felt his foot hit something, and he picked it up. He could make out some details with his hands. It didn't take long for him to realize what it was. Cleanup started, and everyone except Aizawa, Ashido, Kirishima, and Tokoyami got to work. Ashido was cuddling Kirishima under the blanket, helping him get warm as well as trying to get comfort for herself. Aizawa was sitting on the floor, staying out of the way, since he was now blind. Tokoyami was holding Tsuyu's head, staring at her dead eyes. It took some convincing for the Raven teen to give her up. Once everything was cleaned, it didn't take long for the next order to be given. Player 14 must let their quirk run wild for 20 minutes, or Player 11 will be punished. Tokoyami and Shoji shared a look. The duplet-armed teen shook his head, a silent sign for his friend to disobey. But Tokoyami and Dark Shadow had already made up their minds. The lights flickered out. The only light source came from the broadcasting test on the main monitor. The doors to the other rooms closed, locking everyone within the main room. Dark Shadow emerged from Tokoyami as the young man shook in frustration and sorrow. Dark Shadow's eyes glowed red as its form consumed Tokoyami. 20 minutes of hell broke loose as Dark Shadow attacked without mercy. The Shade's roars of anger mixed with Tokoyami's screams of anguish. Everyone's main focus was survival. Obedience confirmed. The light returned as Dark Shadow hid away inside its user. At first, everyone seemed to be alive, although mildly injured. Then, they found Aoyama. His head was caved in, probably dying instantly. Feeling shame for his actions, Tokoyami took it upon himself to dispose of Aoyama's body. After the injured were tended to, and the corpse removed, a new order appeared. Player 9 must kill Player 21 with a sledgehammer within 30 minutes, or 8 random players will be punished. Koda couldn't believe what he had to do. No one could say a word. What does it say? Aizawa asked. Yaoyorozu reluctantly said, It says that Koda has to kill you with a sledgehammer, or 8 of us at random will be punished. Aizawa sighed. Koda, come with me. Koda followed Aizawa as the blind man took him to the storage room. No one could find their voice to protest against this. Before leaving the main room, Aizawa said one last thing to his students. I'll see you on the other side. The teacher and student entered the storage room. Soft sobbing could be heard from the main room. Then there was a loud cry of anguish and heartache, followed by a heavy impact. Obedience confirmed. Aizawa's picture got a red X as Koda entered the room, bloody sledgehammer still in hand. He broke down crying as his classmates did what little they could to comfort him. Some couldn't help but compare Aizawa's head to a crushed watermelon as the remains were collected. When the cleaning was done, the students returned to the main room and waited for the next order. And that player number 4 must cut off one of their legs within 2 hours, or 6 random players will be punished. After adjusting his glasses and swallowing his nerves, Ida made his way to the storage room. He couldn't exactly use his bare hands to complete his order. Ida, you aren't actually... Midoriya pleaded. There's no other way. Following the orders is the only way to avoid unnecessary deaths, Ida said without hesitation. Ashido stood abruptly and angrily, leaving the blanket-wrapped Kirishima alone. Bakugo took her place to help Red Riot recover. That's a lie and you know it! Tsuyu followed her order and she's now dead. Tokoyami did what he was told and Aoyama died in the process. Koda followed his order and killed Aizawa as a result. Who's to say that you or others won't die if you make yourself an amputee? Ida thought for a moment, his eyes drifting to his legs. His gaze returned to Ashido, a confident smile on his face to mask his overwhelming terror. The lives of 6 of my classmates and teacher in exchange for one of my legs? I'm willing to make that trade. Will you need any help? Todoroki asked. No, I can do this on my own, but I would appreciate your help after it's done to cauterize the wound. Todoroki nodded. Despite the poker face the half-and-half teen was maintaining, he was just as anxious as everyone else. Ida entered the storage room, closing the door behind him. Once inside, the class rep grabbed a length of rope, a saw, and some cloth to bite down on. He noticed his hands were shaking. It was quiet for a short while in the main room as the timer for Ida's order ticked away. Then the sounds of muffled screaming came through the door. Everyone was disgusted by the pained noises they could only just make out, but Shoji had it the worst. Because of his quirk, Shoji could hear everything Ida was doing. The cutting and tearing of flesh, the breaking of ligaments, the harrowing yet muffled screams. Despite everything happening behind closed doors, Shoji could make out everything as though he was right there with Ida. It almost made the duply armed teen throw up. Everyone started to get worried when the timer had 20 minutes remaining. But then... obedience confirmed. The storage room door opened, and everyone jumped when Ida's severed leg was tossed into the main room. Ida entered slowly shortly after, leaning heavily on the doorframe. The rope was still tied around what remained of his right leg, just above the knee. Despite how tightly the makeshift tourniquet was secured, blood still spilled from the wound, dripping to the floor. Done. Todoroki was at Ida's side before the cleanup timer started. He got Ida to sit on the floor. Blood was already beginning to pool under the stump. Get ready. This'll hurt, Todoroki warned. It can't be any worse than what I just did. Todoroki immediately used his right hand to cauterize Ida's wound. He didn't want to give Ida a chance to think about it. Ida yelped in shock as the wound was burned closed, but was quick to bite his tongue. The smell of burnt flesh and blood began to permeate throughout the room. Ida did his best not to black out from the pain, but it was clear to all that the class rep would lose consciousness at any moment. While that was going on, everyone else focused on cleaning the spilled blood and severed limb. It didn't take long for the next order to appear. Everyone rolls a set of 6-sided dice. If a player rolls a 7 or higher, the player is safe. If a player rolls a 6 or lower, that player will be punished. No one was really sure what to make of this one. They were going to put their lives in the hands of random chance? Were there even any dice they could use? After a set of dice was found from the storage room, Yaoyorozu made her own set of dice that looked nearly identical to the found set of dice, but with a key difference. Her dice were loaded to land on 9 every time. She didn't know if the king would punish her for this, but she was willing to take the risk. Ashido was the first to roll. She got an 11 and was relieved. The dice were handed to Ida, who rolled them weakly. He rolled a 6. There was little time to react as an unseen attack cleaved through Ida's neck. Blood splattered outward, scattering red across the floor and students. A red X covered Ida's portrait as the light left his eyes. Ojiro picked up the dice, noticing Ida's blood had splattered on them. He was hesitant, but rolled anyway. It was a 9. Ojiro didn't know he had been holding his breath until he let out an exacerbated sigh. Bakugo grabbed the dice and rolled them quickly. They landed on 11. He was safe. The explosive blonde handed the dice to Kirishima. The frostbitten redhead took the dice with both hands and tossed them. They clattered to the floor and landed on 7, just making the cut. Tokoyami grabbed the dice, rolling them with a blank stare in his eyes. His roll landed on 9. Damn it, he said in disappointment. Midoriya gave the raven teen a disturbed look as he grabbed the dice and made his roll. He got a 7. He too was just barely safe. Sero took the dice with confidence and rolled without fear. When the dice rolled 2, he was filled with panic. A red line appeared vertically down Sero's body. The two halves of cellophane fell apart, spilling gore and guts everywhere. A red X appeared over Sero's picture. Ashido wanted to scream at the sight, but her voice failed her. No one moved for several moments. Then Yaoyorozu grabbed the dice. While everyone was distracted by Sero's death, she switched out the original dice for the set she made. She threw her roll, believing her deception would work. Everyone heard the dice hit the floor and they landed on 9. A smile came across everyone's faces, but Todoroki noticed the dice didn't have any signs of blood on them. Not even a smear of crimson could be seen. Yaoyorozu burst into flames. The fire consumed her clothes and body, causing the stench of charred flesh to fill the space. Everyone was confused as they backed away in fear. Yaoyorozu had rolled high enough to pass. She should have been spared from punishment. As the vice representative's screams died with her, a new message appeared on the central monitor. Honey is a free browser add-on available on Google, Opera, Firefox, Safari. In short, if it's a browser, it has Honey. Honey automatically saves you money when you check out on sites like Amazon, Papa John's, Kohl's. Wherever you shop, it's a good chance that Honey can save you money. All you have to do when you're checking out at these major sites is click that little orange button and it will scan the entire internet and find discount codes for you. It takes 2 clicks to install Honey. Now, anytime you check out, Honey will scan the entire internet and find coupon codes for you. If there's a coupon code, they will find it. And if there's not a coupon code, you can rest assured that you are getting the best price possible, and there literally is not one available on the internet. If you install Honey right now, you can save like $50 to $100 on your shopping doing nothing. There's literally no reason not to install Honey. It just takes 2 clicks. 10 million people use it, 100,000 5-star reviews. Unless you hate money, you should install Honey. Player number 20 has been punished for using loaded dice. Please do not let this happen again. The fake dice lit ablaze and turned to ash, just like the remains of Momo Yaoyorozu. Somehow, the real dice remained intact, unmarred by the flames. Shoji fished the dice from the ashes. His hands were shaking as he held the still warm dice. He knew there was a little over 60% chance he'd get a 7 or higher, but those odds still scared him. He rolled the dice all the same, and they landed on 3. Shoji closed his eyes and waited for the end. He felt something cold pass through his body several times. Then there was nothing. All but Tokuyami screamed as Meizo Shoji disintegrated into a mess of diced flesh. At this point, Tokuyami had grown numb to seeing his classmates mercilessly killed. The Raven teen dug through his friend's remains to find the dice. After wiping some of the blood off, he handed the dice to Koda. The timid boy looked very nervous. "This order won't end until all of us have rolled. The sooner we all roll, the sooner it ends. Now take your turn." Koda reluctantly took the dice and rolled them quickly. He kept his eyes closed, not wanting to see his results. No one made a noise as Koda's roll got him a total of 5. Suddenly, Koda's eyes opened wide. He made desperate gasping noises as he clawed at his throat. An unseen hand gripped around his neck. Midoriya wanted to help his classmate, attempt to save him, anything. The freckled teen was sick and tired of watching his friends suffer, and, in Midoriya's mind, suffocation was a horrible way to go. Jiro didn't even wait for the life to leave Koda's body. She picked up the dice and rolled. Unfortunately, they landed on 5 as well. Well, shit. Jiro's head spun round and round and round, twisting in an unnatural and paranormal way. The skin tore as it reached its limit, and her head fell off her shoulders. Her body slumped to the floor as blood spilled from her open neck. Her face still had an annoyed and frustrated expression as it rolled across the ground. Although Sato was wary, he picked up the dice and got ready to roll. He gave the dice a good and hearty shake before tossing them. They clattered across the floor and landed on 3. There was a moment of calm before Sato clutched his chest in agony. He couldn't breathe and he was sweating bullets. Sugar Man passed a few minutes later after suffering from his heart attack. The last one to roll was Todoroki. Doing his best to maintain what little composure he had left, he picked up the dice and made his roll. The half-and-half teen didn't let go of his breath until he saw the dice read 9. Obedience confirmed. The cleanup timer began again. Knowing that the mess before them would take quite a while to clean, the remaining students got to work disposing of their friends' bodies. The only portraits that weren't marked with a red X were Ashido, Ojiro, Kirishima, Tokuyami, Todoroki, Bakugo, and Midoriya. The cleaning got wrapped up with 10 minutes to spare. Ashido had been fuming the entire time. She'd been bottling up what she'd been thinking and feeling since the first death of the game, and that volcano was ready to explode. "This is bullshit! I hate this! Why can't this twisted game just end already? I swear I would do anything just to get out of here!" "Come on, Ashido! You don't mean that!" Midoriya tried to reason with her. You don't know that! For real, I'd commit murder if it means I'd get out of here! Ashido yelled back. The central monitor gave a new order. Player number 2 must kill any 2 or more of their classmates within 20 minutes, or they will receive punishment. Player 18 must protect their classmates at all costs, or they will receive punishment. The deafening silence was almost suffocating. Midoriya didn't move while the others backed away from Ashido, her face shadowed and unreadable. Ashido? Please? Whatever it takes. I will end this game! Ashido tried to move in for an attack, but Midoriya got in her way. The freckled teen remained on the defense. Based on how Ashido was acting, he knew words wouldn't get through to her. Bakugo carried Kirishima on his back to keep him safe because he'd be an easy target. The explosive blonde was frustrated because he didn't know if he was allowed to fight back. Todoroki was equally frustrated. He could trap Ashido in ice in less than a second, meaning a victory for Midoriya. But that would mean that Ashido would be... An acid spray was thrown at Ojiro. He blocked the attack with his tail, earning a burn instead of the alternative. The acid cut deep through the flesh, going to bone. It's clear that Ashido was playing for keeps. Midoriya eventually found an opening to tackle Ashido to the ground. She thrashed in his grip like a cornered animal. She wasn't acting out of anger or hatred. It was pure terror. Ashido, you don't have to do this! We'll find a way out! You don't know that! Get off me! Ashido grabbed Midoriya's arms and began burning them with her quirk. It didn't take much to make the young man scream. He retracted, releasing Ashido and seeing his arms now had deep, hand-shaped burns. Pinky took that moment of weakness to send a high-pressure stream of acid at Tokiyami. Dark Shadow did its best to protect Tokiyami, but the bird boy got hit all the same. His face and chest became covered in acid, melting to the bone. He died from shock and pain, his portrait gaining a red X. That was one down for Ashido. Just one to go. Tokiyami, no! Midoriya screamed. Donning full cowling, Midoriya blitzed Ashido and threw her into a wall. He had to take this seriously, if he wanted to prevent any more deaths. As much as he despised the idea, Midoriya was going to have to go on the offensive. 20 minutes couldn't have gone by any slower. Midoriya's clothes were burned from the acid, as was his skin and flesh. Ashido had severe bruising across her body, and possibly some broken or fractured bones. The combat stopped when a soft buzzer rang out. All eyes turned to the monitor. Player 18, obedience confirmed. Player 2, obedience failed. Ashido was petrified. No, I don't want to die! Her body began to dissolve as though she were drenched in acid. She lurched towards her classmates, her liquefying form creating a trail behind her. Help me! I don't want to go! Her voice became more garbled as her form dissolved. She eventually was nothing more than a fleshy and bloody puddle. Everyone spent a few moments in silence, taking in what just happened. The cleanup timer began. Remains were collected, and wounds were tended to. It was difficult to dispose of the Ashido puddle, but they managed to throw her down the furnace chute before cleanup time ran out. It wasn't long until the next order appeared on the screen. Player 15 must burn their face within 20 minutes, or 4 random players will be punished. Todoroki groaned, a mixture of annoyance and frustration and stress. He didn't give anyone a moment to talk him out of it. He placed his left hand on his right cheek, not covering his eye, and used his fire. No one had time to react as the flames licked at Todoroki's face. The half-and-half teen barely made a noise of pain or discomfort. After half a minute, Todoroki removed his flaming hand from his face. There was a fresh and blistering hand-shaped burn on his right cheek. Obedience confirmed. Now my face is almost symmetrical, Todoroki joked, which actually managed to get a slight chuckle out of Bakugo, Ojiro, and Kirishima. The next order didn't appear until after Todoroki's face was tended to. Player 17 must kill their best friend with their own hands, or both players will be punished. Bakugo had been hanging on to Kirishima since Ashido fought Midoriya. Bakugo couldn't hide his gasp of shock and fear. To murder Kirishima to save him? It seems so counterintuitive. His grip around Red Riot tightened without him realizing it. Bakugo, you gotta do it, or we're both dead. But, no buts. Aizawa told us to follow the king's orders, and we all agreed to do that. Besides, I don't mind biting the bullet if it means I can keep my friends safe. You could hit me in the head with your AP shot, right? That'd take me out quickly, huh? Bakugo was conflicted. He didn't want to kill Kirishima, anyone but Eijiro. However, the shark-toothed redhead would probably suffer something worse than death if Bakugo didn't follow through. Reluctantly, Bakugo agreed with his friend's proposal. Kirishima stood with his back against the wall, ready to take the hit despite his fears. Bakugo stood not too far away and readied his shot. He couldn't stop looking at Kirishima's face. The redhead had a grin on his face, that stupid shark-tooth grin. Bakugo tried to aim at his friend's face as he charged the blast, but he couldn't get his hands to stop shaking. He couldn't find the strength to fire the shot without closing his eyes. AP shot! He shouted as he held back tears. The explosion echoed loudly throughout the small concrete space. When Bakugo opened his eyes, he saw that he had missed Kirishima's head. His hand had dropped as he fired his shot. A massive hole was blown through Kirishima's chest. The redhead looked down at the wound before returning his gaze to Bakugo. Kirishima was still smiling. You missed, Baku bro. Kirishima coughed up a mouthful of blood before falling to the floor, dead. Obedience confirmed. The cleanup timer started. Bakugo took care of Kirishima's body alone, leaving the others to deal with the blood that got left behind. Ojiro might have been imagining it, but he thought he could see tears welling up in Bakugo's eyes. Once everything was clean and the final four assembled in the main room, the next order appeared. All players must tell their most personal secret to everyone within 20 minutes. Those who do not share their secret or lie about their secret will be punished. If a player tells another player's secret, both players will be punished. The four remaining students were confused by how tame the order seemed. None of them were sure who should go first, so they were silent for the first 2 minutes. Bakugo spoke up first. Fine then, I'll go first. I have a backup plan if being a hero somehow doesn't work out. I'll go to the best culinary school in the country, then open my own restaurant that'll become world famous. No one was really expecting that from Bakugo. Then again, he was really good at cooking and seemed to enjoy it. Todoroki went next. My secret is about my father. The training he put me through when I was a child was more like abuse in disguise. He isolated me from my siblings and would physically abuse my mother when she tried to protect me. I hate him. I hate that man for everything he did to me, my siblings, and especially my mother. This came as a shock to everyone, even Midoriya. The freckled teen knew that Todoroki's childhood wasn't that great, but he never really knew the details. Ojiro went next. Well, remember when Koda was ordered to kill Aizawa? I don't think I'd be able to take a life, even if my life depended on it. After the words left his mouth, Ojiro's head twisted 180 degrees. He fell to the floor dead, as a red X covered his portrait. While Bakugo and Todoroki contemplated what Ojiro's lie meant, Midoriya realized that he only had one big secret, and it involved the former #1 pro hero. Bakugo already knew the secret, but he didn't know what Todoroki would do with that information. Or the king, for that matter, since he was most likely seeing and hearing everything going on in the room. Midoriya made his decision. There was no other option for him. I can't tell my secret. Both Bakugo and Todoroki were confused. The blonde thought for a moment before realizing what secret Deku would have to spill. He couldn't tell Midoriya's secret. There'd be no point. Both of them would be punished if he did. Hey, come on, Deku. Now's not the time to be messing around. Just tell us already. I can't. It'd be dangerous if anyone found out. Your life's on the line. No secret could be worth that. I'd have to disagree. This secret is too important. Bakugo grabbed Midoriya by the shirt. Despite the threatening action, the green-haired boy didn't flinch or falter. Listen here, nerd! You're dead if you don't talk! Who cares if Icy Hot knows? Kacchan, as far as we know, the king has been monitoring us the entire time we've been here. You know why I can't say it. Damn it! Don't be stupid! You're not supposed to die, Izuku! To say that Midoriya was shocked to hear Bakugo call him by his given name would be an understatement. All right, fine. I'll say it. This relieved Bakugo, and he let go of Midoriya. I'm All Might's secret love child! Before the other two players could react, Midoriya's limbs and head exploded off his body. Blood sprayed all over the room. Bakugo was practically drenched in his childhood friend's blood. No! Obedience confirmed. The cleanup timer activated once again. Bakugo fell to his knees, his mind racked with questions. Why did Midoriya have to keep his mouth shut? Why did that dumbass have to play hero and die? With him gone, and All Might having lost the use of One for All. Bakugo, get up. Oh, for the love of... Todoroki slapped the distressed blonde out of his downward spiral. Bakugo looked at Todoroki, seeing that the half-and-half boy looked just as distressed as he felt. The game's not over yet. Yeah, right. Once the bodies were collected and burned, the two returned to the main room. Both were anxious about the next order, for it may be the last. Fight or die. The last man standing wins. Bakugo and Todoroki were unsure of what to do at first. Todoroki couldn't help but chuckle. What's so funny, Icy Hot? Looks like you'll get that no-holds-barred fight after all. Yeah, looks like it. Bakugo smiled upon this realization. The boys walked a few paces away from each other before getting into fighting stance. They didn't want to initiate this mortal combat, but they weren't exactly given an option. This King's game started with 21 players, and now it was down to the final 2. As the king watched on from his hidden location, he smiled as he waited to see who would win his game. Todoroki was the first to take initiative, attacking with his fire as opposed to using his usual ice. Bakugo used his explosions to avoid the attack and charged at Todoroki with a barrage of explosions. The half-and-half team was quick to defend with an ice wall. The match continued to have an ebb and flow as each opponent switched from offensive to defensive at the drop of a hat. One might consider it a dance of death. Bakugo was using every trick and every move he had available to him, but Todoroki was countering and blocking nearly everything. The explosive blonde was starting to get desperate and exhausted. He tried getting close to attack with his AP shot. It was very risky, but it would be worth it if he could reap the rewards of survival. He was about to fire his shot at Todoroki's head when a shark-toothed smile flashed in his mind. This caused Bakugo to hesitate and give Todoroki an opening. The explosive blonde became trapped in ice. He couldn't find the strength to move or use his quirk to escape. Out of all the extras I could face and lose to, I'm glad it was you. Yeah, same here, Todoroki replied. Well, what are you waiting for? Finish it. At first, Todoroki hesitated. He had never seen the explosive blonde give up before. He raised his shaking left hand and held it a few centimeters away from Bakugo's face. Todoroki's breathing picked up pace as it began to sink in what he was about to do. His dread only got worse when Bakugo closed his eyes and accepted his fate. The half-and-half teen had turned away as he sent jets of flame at Bakugo. He pushed his flames hotter and hotter until they glowed a brilliant blue, and he didn't stop until the smell of burning flesh faded away. Although he'd regret it, Todoroki looked at his handiwork. There were no defining features of Bakugo left, just charred remains that went down to the bone. A red X appeared over Bakugo's portrait. Todoroki stood alone, the winner of the king's game. All power to the room shut down. Todoroki used his flames to illuminate his surroundings. He quickly realized he wasn't in the same space he and his deceased peers had been in for the past several hours. He was very wary of this place and was on high alert. The sudden sound of applause put him on edge as he sent fire towards the noise. A silhouetted figure batted the flame away with ease, only inconvenienced by the attack. Excellent show, Shoto Todoroki. You did well to beat my game. I was on the edge of my seat during that last order. And you must be the king I've heard so much about, Todoroki replied. A sourceless light appeared, casting a spotlight down on an interesting silhouette. The being was like a shadow, but more solid. It looked like a man with a crown on his head, though he didn't have any discerning facial features, or if a face at all. Todoroki could feel that man was smiling. That is what I call myself, yes. Let me guess, you're going to ask why I did it, aren't you? Why did I make you and your dear classmates and teacher go through this harrowing endeavor, if you'll pardon the phrase? Todoroki only scowled. Judging by that frustrated and downright mean look you're giving me, I'm correct. Well, as the returning player you call Eraserhead said, I wanted to teach a lesson. Todoroki was seething with anger. You've got some twisted teaching methods. Your lesson was either sometimes you only have the lesser of two evils to choose from, or good intentions could end poorly. Maybe a mix of both. Those are good lessons. Really good, even. I should write those down later. But that wasn't what I was going for. The king could easily read Todoroki's inner turmoil. The main lesson I wanted to teach was more simple than you think. Some people are more willing to do anything in order to survive, even if it means killing those they hold dear. Some of your friends did things that seemed rather out of character, so you might want to keep that in mind. The flame in Todoroki's left hand grew as his ire burned hot. Was all that suffering and death necessary for your lesson? 20 good people that I care about are dead because of you. Unfortunately, some lessons can only be learned the hard way, and I found that pain is a rather good teacher. Now, I have one last order for you, Shoto Todoroki. No! No more, you deranged jester! Fueled from the grief of losing everyone, Todoroki attacked the king with both his flames and his ice. But neither attack got within a meter of the king. His quirk fizzled out and stopped working. The half-and-half teen suddenly felt dizzy and weak. He fell to his knees, finding it difficult to keep his eyes open. Todoroki was helpless as the king approached him step by methodic step. Don't worry, Shoto Todoroki. It's a rather simple order, and I promise there will be no bloodshed for failure. Once in front of the dazed boy, The king knelt down so he was face to face with his champion. He leaned in close and spoke softly. "Wake up." Todoroki awoke in his dorm room in his bed. He felt the right side of his face and found no fresh burn. "It looks like you've won the king's game." Todoroki snapped in the direction of the voice and saw Principal Nezu sitting calmly beside his bed. He couldn't find the words to convey his confusion or disbelief. "You don't have to worry, Todoroki. The king can't get you here." Before Todoroki could make any inquiries, he heard the voices of the dead outside of his door. He quickly opened his door to find all of his peers alive and uninjured from the king's game. "How? I saw you all die!" "The king's game was an elaborate dream, courtesy of a rather powerful quirk. Perhaps it would be best if everything was explained to all of you over some tea," Nezu offered. The traumatized 1A students sat quietly within the lobby of their dorm house. While Aizawa and Nezu were making tea for everyone, Present Mike and Midnight spoke. "When Mineta and Hagakure told me that they woke up from the king's game, I told them to get Midnight while I contacted Nezu. I then checked up on Eraserhead and some of you little listeners. It was about then that Kaminari woke up and mentioned the same game," Present Mike started. "I came by as soon as I could. At first I thought it was you kids pulling a prank. But after more details of what you experienced came to light, it was clear it wasn't a prank," Midnight added. "There wasn't anything we could do to wake you guys up. And as far as we know, the only way to wake up from the king's game is to win, or fail the order." "I just hope your game wasn't as bad as ours," Midnight added. Aizawa and Nezu entered the room and began to pass around the tea. "The king managed to up the ante from our last game. This one was far worse than our first." Midnight and Present Mike winced at the prospect of the king making an even bloodier death game. "I find the whole experience rather interesting. To go up against someone with such a twisted frame of mind. Perhaps I will find myself in a king's game one day." Nezu seemed a little too happy when he said that. Once everyone had their tea, their principal began to tell them what was known about the royal pain in the ass they had encountered. "From what we understand, his quirk is known as the game. Although we don't know its distance limitations, we do know there has to be a minimum of 7 players for his quirk to be effective, but no more than 35. We also understand he can only mentally claim those who are asleep, which is why he didn't strike until the dead of night. Despite the unlawful use of his quirk, he doesn't just target heroes. We've also had reports of him targeting villains and mob families. Those villains that experience his game would always turn themselves in, stating that the king ordered them to do so and confess to their crimes. And yet, despite all the winners of various king's games, we don't know what he looks like. While in his game space, he can make himself look like anything or anyone." Nezu took a long sip of his tea. Aizawa then voiced his thoughts. "Despite his methods being vile and horrible, they do gain results. I hate to say it, but my experience with the king's game helped me become the man I am now. But the king isn't a good man or a sane one. He is a deranged and twisted psychopath that needs to be taken down. I was hoping none of you would have encountered the king, and for that, I am sorry. I believe it would be fair to allow you guys to have a day off classes. Tomorrow, we'll ease back into things and hopefully put this behind us. You were all very brave and very strong, and I'm proud of you. Now, get some rest. I'm exhausted, so I'm sure some of you are too." Grateful for the time off they were given, the 1A students enjoyed their time being alive again. Some talked to their classmates about what they experienced and what they missed, while others were silent and kept to themselves. Todoroki retired to his room, thinking he might get some rest or work on his studies. He felt relieved that the king's game was just a dream. His room was the same as he had left it. His bed was unmade, but the rest of the room was clean. The lack of clutter made it easy for Todoroki to spot the folded piece of paper that lay on the floor. Curious, he picked it up. It wasn't like him to leave things scattered about. He felt his fight-or-flight response start to kick in as he opened the folded paper. Upon reading the note, Todoroki's breath hitched and his heart skipped a beat. He dropped the note as his mind was filled with despair. Congrats on winning. Thanks for playing. Signed, the King.